What would you do if the boy you were dating told you couldn't wear makeup or dress a certain way? My early 20s, I dated somebody who was extremely toxic. You guys know who I'm talking about. And when he started showing his true colors, it wasn't completely obvious. He was still kind and he would compliment me. But after a while, the compliments turned into judgments. Even if I wore a big t-shirt and sweatpants, he somehow tried to make it seem like I was still trying to be provocative. And worse, if I ever tried to wear a sundress or something that was a little bit fitted. And he would have this thing about lipstick. If I ever tried to wear red lipstick or something colored, it meant I was trying to bring too much attention to my lips. And of course, in his world, that meant that I was trying to hurt his feelings and that I was directly attacking him because I was looking for it elsewhere. One day we're at a mall and at this point I kind of changed the way that I was dressing, but for some reason he managed to catch a guy looking at me. And when we got into his car, he asked me if I could just never again wear the clothes that I was wearing. So the fact that a grown-ass man was staring at me meant that I somehow bewitched this man and made him look at me. So what did I do? I started diminishing myself. I stopped wearing the clothes that I liked. Goodbye to makeup. I've always been addicted to blush since I was a kid. I didn't wear blush for months. He wanted to put out my flame and he succeeded. Because the more my flame burnt, the more insecure he got. And now whenever you guys send me a story time about your toxic ex or toxic boyfriend, I always think back to that. If I knew then what I knew now, I would have realized that the problem was him, not me. So if you feel like your partner, boyfriend, girlfriend is somehow manipulating you, trying to diminish you, make you feel less than, or try to control you, that's your sign to step away. Leave. Actually, don't just leave. Run. Run as fast as you can. You're too beautiful for that, babe. Stalker sister out. My mother-in-law treats me like a maid. My parents regret forcing me into an arranged marriage. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. It all started 2 years ago. I was turning 25 years old. To my parents, this meant I was really, really old. They needed to marry me off as quickly as humanly possible. Now, the problem was that I didn't want to get married. My plan was to be single for the rest of my life. You see, I want peace in my life. I don't want to have to deal with a man. But no. Our religion dictates that my parents can marry me off whenever they want. It came to me with the news that they found somebody for me. It was a wealthy family that lived 3 hours away from us. My parents are middle class. This family was upper class. My parents showed this guy a picture of me, and apparently he said that I needed to be his wife. And quote, he would know how to take care of me. I begged my parents not to make me marry this guy, but at the same time, I knew I could not go against what they wanted. I couldn't just stay in their house forever. I met him and his family, and they were actually lovely people. I was shocked. I liked my mother-in-law. She was funny, spunky, and her and I connected right away. The marriage was planned in 3 months. Everything happened so quick. My mother-in-law did pretty much all the planning. All I had to do was say yes or no to everything. But here's what I didn't know. After we got married, we were supposed to move into his parents' house. They had a separate wing to their house that was only for us. This meant I had to see my mother-in-law every day. And things get really bad. Part 2 is up. My mother-in-law treats me like a maid. After the arranged marriage, my new husband told me that we were going to go live with his parents. Mind you, I had no idea this was the plan before we got married. I was completely against it. I wanted to stay close to my parents, and ideally live with my husband on our own. But in our religion, it's very normal to live with parents. Now, really quickly, because I'm sure you guys are wondering, did I even like my new husband? Absolutely not. I mean, I thought he was okay looking, I was not in love with him, and I didn't really know him that well. Because this was an arranged marriage, it's not like our parents were worried about us actually liking each other. I was 25 and my parents needed to marry me off as quickly as possible. After the wedding, I actually decided to go back to my parents' house. My new husband showed up a couple of days later and said, let's go. So off we went 3 hours away to live with his parents. Like I mentioned in part 1, they are a very wealthy family. This means their house is huge. In fact, they had a whole separate wing just for us. Apparently, they had been saving this wing for when he got married. This meant I saw my mother and father-in-law every single day. We would all usually have breakfast. I decided to get back into school. So off I'd go to school all day. Once I'd get home, I'd have a workout, cook, and go to bed. I was okay with this for the first couple of weeks. Slowly, my mother-in-law started asking me to do favors around the house. And just to let you know, she had 2 live-in maids. Why did she need me to do all these things for her? For example, they would do lavish dinners every single Sunday for the entire family. After the dinner, she would ask me to pick up the plates from the table and take them to the kitchen. While the live-in maids would start cleaning up, she'd ask me to serve dessert. At first, I was okay with this. I wanted to be a good daughter-in-law, and I wanted to help. But eventually, she started asking me to help with the laundry and with cooking during the week. With my school schedule, it became too much. One day when she asked me to help out with cleaning the floors, I put my foot down and respectfully said, I actually don't have time. I can try to do it this weekend though. That's when she simply looked at me and walked away. The next thing I know, my husband's calling me in a rage. He accused me of being disrespectful to her and to the family. He then asked me that I should just clean whatever she wants me to clean. I told my parents all of this and they got really upset. My parents actually wanted me to come home, so I took one of their many cars and went straight to my parents. They really regret the arranged marriage. My husband, of course, did come looking for me, but all he told me and my parents was that I was an ungrateful wife. He told me I needed to go back to his house and that we would just work things out. I don't believe him. I didn't marry him to be a maid. Now his family is threatening to sue mine. So I decided to blast him on the internet for all their friends and family to see. They desperately asked me to take everything down, and I said I would as long as they left me alone. So I'm still technically married. Am I terrible for doing this? My boyfriend is moving in with his girl best friend and I don't trust her one bit. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. My boyfriend and I have been together for almost a year. When I met him, he already had a very big group of best friends. One of them was this girl. There's actually another girl in the group, but my boyfriend and this particular girl, let's call her Lacey. Lacey is completely obsessed with my boyfriend. I tell him all the time, but he doesn't want to listen to me. She goes out of her way to spend time with him, and she'll do girlfriend things for him. Sometimes she'll call him and say, I cooked us dinner, come over to my apartment. She even goes to his apartment and helps him do laundry. Let me go back though. When we started dating, he asked me not to be uncomfortable and that him and her were only good friends. But as soon as I saw them with each other, it was visible that she was in love with him. When he first brought me around to meet his friends, she was super territorial. She would sit next to him and even sat on his lap in front of me. And this made my boyfriend uncomfortable. He asked her to sit on a chair instead of his lap. After that, I asked him if he had feelings for her and he said no. He said he's only ever seen her as a sister, that the thought of hooking up with her makes him want to vomit. Lacey reached out to me and asked me to have lunch with her. Throughout the whole lunch, all she talked about was my boyfriend, how amazing he is, and how only a good girl deserves him. Part 2 is up. My boyfriend is moving in with his girl best friend and I don't trust her. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I was sending me on Instagram. When her and I went to lunch, all she talked about was my boyfriend. That's when she started saying things like, he only deserves a really good girl. That's when I was straight up with her. I told her that he had already chosen me because he loved me and that I didn't need her to tell me what my boyfriend needed. You guys should have seen the look on this girl's face. She was shocked that I would defend myself and even talk back to her. Then she said, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel bad. I told her that I didn't feel bad and that I knew what she was doing. She was basically trying to intimidate me and make me feel that I wasn't good enough for my boyfriend. She denied it and started apologizing. But at least I made it clear to her that I was not stupid and that she was not going to walk all over me like she probably did with all of his exes. By the way, one of his past girlfriends actually broke up with her because of this girl. I mean, Lacey. Found this out through one of the other friends. They told me that I needed to be careful with her. And that's why I was prepared to go to lunch with her. Guess what happened though? I called my boyfriend to say hi to him and that's when he starts yelling at me. He said Lacey called him to tell him that I had attacked her at lunch. That I basically threatened her. I explained to him what happened from my point of view, and he said that she was probably just overreacting. But it was her word against mine. Part 3 is up. My boyfriend is moving in with his girl best friend and I do not trust her. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. After Lacey told my boyfriend that I had attacked her and threatened her, he told me to keep my distance. So I did. But that meant that he would hang out with her without me. I found this completely unacceptable. That's when I told my boyfriend that she was manipulative, that she had clearly planned everything out so that he and her could be alone. Then I told him that his ex-girlfriend left him because of her. He told me that I didn't know the full story and that I should mind my own business. That's when I noticed that he wouldn't come over to my apartment every day. And guess why? His best friend Lacey told him that she had a stalker and that she needed my boyfriend to stay over her house so that she could feel protected and safe. I just can't. I told him that she was clearly manipulating him and probably lying about the stalker situation so that he could spend more time with her. And just like that, 2 days later, he told me that they were moving in together and that she miraculously found an apartment big enough for the two of them. In 2 days? I don't think so. I think she had been planning this the whole time. And my boyfriend is just stupid enough to fall for it. I told him if he moved in with her that he should just forget about me. He begged me not to leave him, so I guess I'm still his girlfriend. He's still debating whether or not to move in with her. He says he doesn't want to lose me, but he wants to be able to be there for her. I think I should break up with him, but maybe there's another solution. What do you guys think I should do? Story time about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. I come from a really big family. My mom has 5 sisters and 1 brother, and my dad has 4 brothers and sisters. All of them have their own kids, so I have a lot of cousins. And this means we have a lot of family get-togethers. Every single weekend, someone is hosting a party. We all get together and eat, and it's actually a really nice time. But there's always that one creepy uncle. In my case, it's my mom's brother. He's 46-year-old and has never married, but he's a bachelor. He's got money, so he basically has a bunch of sugar babies. Whenever my family tells him that he needs to get married, he says he'll never get married to anybody. He thinks women only exist for the pleasure of men. When I turned 16, I noticed that he would stare at me a lot. At first, it was just staring. Every now and again, he never did anything really creepy then, but just the staring was enough for me. I never told my mom about it then, not until I turned 18. This is when he started making comments like, wow, you're growing into your body, or wow, you got great hips. He would make comments about how I was growing up, like, ew. He even told my dad that he needed to keep me away from guys because I was growing up really quickly. And because of my curves, men would think that I was a woman. This is when I finally told my mom that he was making me super uncomfortable. She thought it was funny at first, so I avoided him at all costs. Part 2. Story time about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's me on Instagram. When I told my mom that he was making me super uncomfortable, she laughed it off. She thought it was funny. She said, oh, you know how he is. So from that point on, I basically avoided my uncle every time we were at a family event. When I turned 20, this is when things got even worse. He would ask me things like if I was a virgin, or if I had a boyfriend, if I had ever been on dates. And one time he even told me that he would get very jealous if I ended up bringing a guy to one of our family events. One time he complimented me on the dress that I was wearing, so after that, I only wore baggy clothes to family events. The fact that I had to change the way that I dress so that he could control himself makes me sick. I finally told my mom again that my uncle was always bothering me. That's when she told me that the world is filled with men like him, and that all I needed to do was just ignore him. So I told my dad everything. My dad took it a little more seriously and told my uncle that he needed to stop making comments. My uncle just laughed. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's me on Instagram. I finally told my dad and he told my uncle to stop making comments. My uncle just laughed and told my dad that he was overreacting, and that all he said to me was that I was a pretty girl. What a liar. In part 1 and 2, I told you guys that it was getting worse, but here's where it actually gets even worse. Like I said, I have a really big family, so my cousins are growing up too. One of them just turned 13 and my uncle cannot stop staring at her. She's maturing a lot quicker than most 13-year-olds. He's already staring at her. So here's what I did. At the next family event, I sat right next to him. Every time he would stare at one of my cousins or try to make a comment at me, I called him out for it in front of everybody. I even recorded the things that he said. The fact that I even have to do this at a family event makes me sick. Instead of enjoying my time with my family, I have to sit next to my creepy uncle policing him. Anyway, it's totally worth it though. I'm making sure that my cousins don't feel uncomfortable. After I had enough recordings of him saying nasty things, at the next family event, I showed it to my grandma. I basically played it for the entire family. My grandma told him that he couldn't come to any more events if he was going to behave that way. And of course, he apologized to everyone right away. But not to me, he apologized to my dad. After his half-ass apology, he was let back into family events. I don't think that's enough punishment. Give me some ideas because I think I deserve justice. Creepy uncle. My friend confessed to me that he's attracted to my best friend. Should I leave him? Disclaimer, is not my story time, send me on Instagram. I know you guys are gonna all say yes immediately, but hear me out. My boyfriend and I have been dating for 6 months. My best friend and I actually met him at a bar. That night, I never expected that he would ever come after me. I consider my best friend the prettier of the two of us, so I'm used to her getting hit on instead of me. But that night, my boyfriend came to me. He talked to me pretty much the entire night, and my best friend told me to go for it. So I did. He and I spent the night together, and after that, we were inseparable. To the point where he wanted me to move in with him after 2 months. My parents thought I was absolutely crazy and they didn't want me to move in with him, but I did anyway. I come from a Latino family, so this was absolutely reprehensible. I went against my family's wishes and they actually stopped speaking to me for a little bit, but luckily I got them back. My boyfriend during that time gave me all his support. He told me that my family would come around eventually and that they would see that we were in love. So living together was the logical next step. After 3 months of living together, I knew that I wanted to marry him, and he would talk about marriage all the time. He asked me what kind of ring I would want and what I would want for the proposal. We even started talking about our honeymoon. I was also starting to get in the best shape of my life. I was looking super snatched. My boyfriend told me that he loved the way that I look, but that he didn't want me to get skinny. Again, I just felt like he was supporting me and loving me. Around this time, my best friend started dating somebody. After a few weeks, they got really serious about the relationship. And of course, we went on double dates. After the third double date, I noticed that my boyfriend was getting a little annoyed. I got the feeling he was jealous of my best friend's boyfriend. Follow for part 2. My boyfriend confessed to me that he's attracted to my best friend. Should I leave him? Disclaimer, is not my story time, send me on Instagram. I asked him if he was jealous of my best friend's boyfriend, and that's when he said no. But every time we would go on double dates, he would get in such a bad mood. 3 weeks ago, my best friend told me that she was moving in with her boyfriend. And when I told my boyfriend that they were moving in, his face almost went green. I asked him what was wrong and he said nothing. After that, he went into the bathroom and didn't come out for 40 minutes. Again, I asked him if he was okay and he said yeah. And I sat him down and asked him to be honest with me. That's when he said, I'm attracted to your best friend. Instantly started to cry because I had already been suspecting it. He explained to me that he didn't have any feelings for her until she got a boyfriend, and that he felt that he had some sort of ownership over her. Before my best friend got a boyfriend, the three of us would hang out a lot. And not once then did I ever get a feeling that he was attracted to her. He told me that he would never act on his feelings, but he didn't want to go on any more double dates. I asked him if he wanted to be with her instead of me, and he said absolutely not. He said that I was the love of his life and that attraction only meant attraction, that he didn't have feelings for her. A few days later, he took me to the most expensive restaurant in our city and asked me to marry him. But I didn't know what to say. I can't stop thinking that he's attracted to my best friend. Part 3 is up. My friend confessed to me that he's attracted to my best friend. What should I do? Disclaimer, is not my story time, sending me on Instagram. After he proposed, I told him I didn't know what to say. He told me to think it over. I finally decided to tell my best friend what my boyfriend had told me. But he had confessed that he was attracted to her. First she laughed. I told her no, I'm serious, he confessed that he's attracted to you. That's when she told me I needed to break up with him. That's when I told her that he had also proposed. And she said, well then you really need to break up with him now. That's when she told me that she didn't want me to resent her and that it was completely out of her control. And I didn't. I promised her that I would never resent her for my boyfriend being attracted to her. It's not like she ever did anything on purpose to make him feel attracted. interested. She also told me that marrying him right now would be rushing into it, and she's kind of right. We've only really known each other for 6 months. Then she told me that she's never gotten the feeling that he's attracted to her. She's never caught him looking at her or anything like that. So now her theory is that he's looking for an easy way out, and that he probably wants me to break up with him. But my boyfriend is still sweet and super affectionate. He's constantly showering me with love. My best friend thinks that if I stay with him, our relationship will suffer. I've known my best friend longer. What should I do? Storytime about how my fiance is refusing to help me plan our wedding. Should I leave him? Disclaimer, is not my story time, send me on Instagram. I'm so sad about the palette. My fiance and I met a few years ago through friends. When we first met each other, I had a really bad first impression of him. First off, he was completely up himself. All he did was talk about himself and never once asked me questions. We were surrounded by other people, so I gave him the benefit of the doubt when he asked me out. I said yes, but our first date was kind of the same. He only really talked about himself, his career, the things he likes to do, his favorite foods, his family, his dog. I eventually just started volunteering information because he wouldn't really ask me. After our date, I didn't speak to him for a full 2 weeks. I was really turned off by his attitude, but then he messaged me saying that he was really nervous and that he realizes that he probably could have been a little more talkative. I said, yeah, you could have been. I told him how I really felt and he did apologize and he asked me out to dinner again. This time I invited him to my apartment and he made us a full 4-course meal. By the way, he's a chef. Obviously, that night, I completely fell in love with him. He made all of my favorite foods, but the gourmet version. A few months later, we became boyfriend and girlfriend. There were still a few things that I didn't like about him, though. Like, he never really had anything to talk about other than himself. Exactly a year after we met, he decided to propose, and I said yes. But when I asked him to do things for the wedding, he says no. Part 2 is up. Story time about how my fiance is refusing to help me plan our wedding. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, I said me on Instagram. To be honest, when he asked me to marry him, I was totally blindsided. Honestly felt like our relationship was starting to get stale. So when he asked me to marry him, I was like, for real? He told me that I was the first person who ever made him feel important. And looking back, I realized that it's because he only talked about himself and I really let him talk about only himself. Anyway, I immediately said yes out of the excitement. But when I called my mom to tell her, I was actually crying. Which is like, okay, maybe I shouldn't marry him then. A few weeks into our engagement, we hadn't talked about planning at all. So I decided to ask him, like, what do you want the wedding to be like? That's when he told me that he didn't really care, but that he would just give me money for it. I mean, on one hand, that makes me really happy because I don't want my parents to have to pay for the wedding, and he has a lot of money. But on the other hand, I want him to be involved, especially for the food because he's a chef. I decided to hire a wedding planner because my job is extremely busy. I work in marketing. Asked him to go to a few meetings with me, he said no. When I finally found the perfect wedding planner, I asked my fiance if we could go have lunch with him, and he said no. This is when I blew up in his face. I asked him why he wasn't participating at all. That's when he told me that he was too busy at the restaurant, that he didn't have time to do anything with the wedding. I was like, okay, fine. When it came time to choosing the caterers, I demanded that he go with me. He told me that he would try to get off work, but he never did. Every time I tried to schedule it, he would say that he was busy with work. That's when I told him that his restaurant, which is super fancy, should just cater the whole wedding. And he said no. He told me they were way too busy and ready to get a Michelin star, so there was absolutely no way they could cater his wedding. That's when he said, you can handle it, I trust you. I went home and cried the entire night. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my fiance refuses to help me plan our wedding. Claimers know my story time, I sent me on Instagram. After I got home and cried, he came home and asked me what was wrong. That's when I told him that he didn't seem excited about the wedding, and that leaving all the planning to me made me feel like I was his employee, as if I had nothing better to do, which I do have my career just like he has his. Not to mention the fact that me picking everything I want for our wedding makes it feel like it's my wedding and not ours. He told me that I was overreacting. He also said that he was excited for the wedding, but that he was too tired and too busy to even think about it. That's when I told him that I was really busy and I was really tired too. And he begrudgingly told me that he would carve out some time this week so that we could speak to some of the caterers. I told the wedding planner and he started setting up some meetings. But of course, my fiance canceled on the first 2. He did show up to the 3rd one, but all he did was criticize the food. Then we went cake tasting. I expected this to be fun. When my friends have had cake tastings for their wedding, they always have so much fun. As soon as we showed up to the cake shop, he asked me, where did you find this? That's when I told him that our planner had found it. He said it looked like a supermarket bakery. That's when I told him that I don't mind supermarket bakeries and that it was probably just as good as a French bakery. He laughed and said, wow, you're funny, babe. We tasted the cakes and he actually liked them. Thank God. But then he requested to go to more cake tastings. We ended up going to 5 other places. This was already too much for me. I got a new account at work and I'm still trying to lose weight for the wedding. So him making me run around trying to taste cake is like the straw that broke the camel's back. After 2 weeks, we finally decided on a cake flavor. Most people must have fun planning their weddings, right? But I just feel like I'm drowning. I have to make all the important decisions on my own. I decided to involve my mom and sister and they've helped me so much. Of course, the wedding planner is helping me too, but ultimately the decisions have to be made by me. He hasn't made any effort to help me with anything else. I kinda want to break up with him, but I feel like this isn't a big enough reason to break up with him. What should I do? Story time about how I did the dirty with my crush's brother just to get him jealous. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I just turned 23 years old and I've been in love with the same guy for 5 years. This guy, let's call him Chad. He's always said to me that he doesn't want a girlfriend, but then he'll call me at night for, you know what? I decided to ghost him for a month just to see what would happen, but he didn't even contact me. This obviously hurt my feelings because I was totally in love with him. I would have given anything to be in a serious relationship with him, but all he wanted was to party and hang out with other girls too. He started posting other girls to his story and it made me furious. I couldn't believe that he was doing that to me, but at the same time I couldn't hold it against him. Nonetheless, I was brokenhearted. I decided to date a few guys, but nothing worked. All I kept thinking about was stupid Chad. A little backstory about Chad. He has 2 brothers, one is older and one is younger. The older one is really attractive, and he's also liked me for a very long time, but he also knows that I'm totally in love with Chad, so he never really tried to talk to me because of that. Let's call him Jake. I decided to slide into Jake's DMs, and I told him that I thought he was really hot. He replied right away. Then he said that he had always had a crush on me, but he thought that I was in love with Chad. I lied and told him that I didn't have feelings for Chad, and that I was totally free to date and see whoever I wanted. He wasted no time and asked me out on a date. We ended up having a picnic on the beach for our first date. It was actually super romantic and really nice. We spent about 6 hours at the beach, and of course, I needed to make Chad jealous, so I took pictures with Jake and posted them to my story. A minute after I posted them, Chad started messaging me. He's asking me why I'm with his brother, so I simply responded by saying that he had no right to ask me anything. Then he calls me, but I decided to ignore the call. And suddenly, Jake kissed me. He said he'd been wanting to do 2 of how I did the dirty with my crush's boyfriend just to get him jealous. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. After Jake kissed me, I see I have 5 missed calls from Chad, and I pretty much ignored him the entire night. Jake took me home and nothing else happened. Next morning, I wake up to a missed call from Chad, and also a voice memo. In the voice memo, he starts telling me that he misses me and that he really wants to see me again. My plan was just to completely ignore him, but I caved. I sent him a voice memo back saying that if he wanted something serious with me, that I would totally consider it. Otherwise, I didn't want him to talk to me. He then left me on red. Yep, that's right. He ghosted me again. That's when I called Jake and asked him if he wanted to come over to my place. By the way, at this point, I don't really have feelings for Jake, and I'm totally aware that I was just using him, which I do feel bad for, but it worked. Jake came over and we ordered pizza. We sat down to watch a movie, but of course I pulled out my phone and started posting to my stories. Once again, Chad replies asking me why his brother is at my house, and that's when I really decided to ignore him. I left him on red, and boy did it feel good. Then I see a text from Chad saying I'm coming over. I didn't know what to do, so I told Jake that I needed him to leave because I had work. Part 3 is up. 3 of how I did the dirty with my crush's brother just to get him jealous. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Chad tells me that he's coming over to my place because he's super jealous. I have no choice but to tell Jake to leave. But Jake was super sweet about it and he said he totally understood. He gave me a kiss and left. Not even 2 minutes later, Chad shows up at my door. He comes in and starts asking me questions about his brother and I. Told him he had no right to be jealous or to even ask me any questions because he didn't want a relationship. Then he tried to kiss me and I couldn't resist. We started to kiss and before I knew it, we were, After it was over, I came to my senses and told him to leave. Of course, he pretended to be outraged. He told me that he couldn't believe that I was treating him this way. And that's when I said, well, you've been treating me this way for the past 5 years. He had no comeback. Once again, I asked him to leave and he did. A few hours later, I go to Chad's story and he's hanging out with 2 girls. All I could do was cry. So I knew I needed to one-up him. The following night, I go out with his brother and we do it. I posted a picture of his arm in my bed and this sent Chad into a rage. He calls me, but I ignored all the phone calls. That's when I knew I had to tell Jake to go home before Chad showed up. I pretended to feel sick and asked Jake if he could go home. Chad shows up once again to my house. He asked me if anything happened between his brother and I, and of course I said yes. Out of nowhere, he asked me to be his girlfriend. He tells me that this whole time he's actually been in love with me, but that is a story time about when I broke off my 1.5-year engagement with my ex-fiance. We met on a movie set. He was playing my boyfriend, and within a week, we were already calling each other boyfriend and girlfriend. 2 months into the relationship, he convinced me to move to LA with him because we both wanted to pursue acting seriously, and he was an established model already. He had worked in Tokyo and Paris as a model. Of course, I was so in love. I said yes, and I left my family, which was really heartbreaking for them. I will totally always regret that decision because I left way too soon. I was so young. We struggled for money in LA, but I decided to get a serving job, so I was making more money than he was because he was working at a movie theater making $8 an hour. Because of this, I had to pay for a lot of the bills, and I even started helping him pay off his school loans. We also shared a banking account, which was terrible because I was putting in way more money than he was. I hated the apartment we lived in because I would wake up with roaches in my hair, so I decided to get a second serving job. When I asked him to get a second job as well, he said no because he was very happy at his job. Part 2 is up. too. So I asked my fiance if he could get a second job to help me out with the bills, and he said no. I would tell my mom and sisters about the situation, and they would tell me that he should definitely be helping me out more, and I just would make up excuses for him, and I just thought it's okay, he can work at the movie theater and I will work my 2 jobs. At this point, I was paying for most of the rent, most of the bills, and his student school loans. I owed $20,000, you guys, and I was paying for all of that. I even got a 3rd job because I wanted to save up to move out of that crappy apartment. Finally, I got hired at the strip club as a cocktail waitress, and I was able to quit all of my other jobs. My ex-fiance was definitely happy with the amount of money I was making at the strip club. Of course, he felt absolutely no pressure to get a new job and help me out. I finally put my foot down and told him we were moving to a better apartment because I was not happy in the apartment we were in. I told him he had no right to say no because I was the one paying for everything. We found the perfect apartment and I loved it. It was absolutely beautiful and I felt so at home there. Then one night I was sexually assaulted at the strip club. Of course, I was really affected by it. At first he was supportive, but after a few days he basically told me to get over it. When he told me to just get over the sexual assault that I experienced at the strip club, I was shocked. I couldn't believe that the man I was about to marry would be so insensitive. And then I just started realizing, wait, I am paying for everything. I pay for your bills, I pay for your rent, I pay for your student loans, and you're here telling me to just get over this sexual assault. It was like someone had put a mirror to my face and was showing me the truth. The final straw was when I told him I wanted to quit the strip club because I didn't want to be in that environment and I didn't want to see the man that had sexually assaulted me again. He said, absolutely not, you can't quit, the money is too good. And that's when I broke up with him. I told him that I couldn't be with someone who didn't care enough about me and only really cared about the money and to be kept. He was so comfortable with me paying for everything and him just chilling at a job where he got paid $8 an hour while I was busting my butt every single night. He told me I would never find anyone better than him. The breakup was amicable, thank God. He didn't stress me out or anything. He kind of said, you know, you'll be back. Of course, I never went back. Know your worth and be with someone who actually cares about you. Storytime about how my modeling agency fat shamed me. Today's society has all these beauty standards for us women, and trust me, it gets to me. Back in 2015, I got with a new modeling agency. I actually submitted online, which means they didn't actually see me before they accepted me, so they made an appointment for me to come in and meet my agent. Well, as soon as my agent saw me, she was speechless. She asked me how tall I was and I said 5'2", which they already knew. Then she said, oh, okay. She looks me up and down and says, well, I guess we could use you for shoe modeling. Shoe modeling? Excuse me? She wanted me to notice that her reaction to me was visceral. As the meeting goes on, she asked me what experience I have, and I told her, which I did have quite a lot of experience. I explained to her that I would love to do makeup ads, hair ads, so basically just model with the top half of my body, which to this she said, yeah, you can do that. But then again, she says, I think we'll be able to use you more for shoes. I always want models with small feet. I was literally holding back tears as I was sitting in that chair. Then she says to me, you know what? Maybe if you gain some weight, you could try to be a curvy model. You know, maybe gain 20 pounds. It's probably the only way you'll end up modeling. And when she said this, a tear fell down my face. I couldn't believe that I was just told that the only way that I would ever model was if I gained 20 pounds. And that's when I basically quit. I didn't look for modeling work after that, and they never got me any work. In fact, zero. The way I overcame this was actually just talking to my family, surrounding myself with the people that love me and really care about me. Because ultimately, your family are the people that care about you the most, and the ones that will remind you that you are perfect the way you are. By the way, that agent got fired afterwards. Haha, bye.